Hey there, Tommy from the Run Testers with another running shoe versus. In this video, we are going to be doing a long-awaited versus that you guys have been asking for quite a bit in the comments. We're going to be looking at the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 versus the Nike Vaporfly 3. Now, I got my Vaporfly 3s from Sport Shoes to test out. I wasn't paid to do this, so I can say whatever I want, but they did send me across so that I can do this review. So thanks a lot, Sport Shoes. The Nike Vaporfly 3 costs £234.95 or $250. It weighs in at 188 grams or 6.6 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 8mm. The Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 costs £210 or $225. It weighs in at 209 grams or 7.4 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 8mm. The Nike Vaporfly 3 is the eagerly awaited update to the hugely popular Vaporfly 2. Unlike its predecessor, the Vaporfly sees a number of updates across the length of the shoe to increase comfort and improve performance on race day. One of the biggest updates is a revamped outsole design. This sees a thinner covering than the previous version, which has allowed for a very slight increase in midsole foam. The shoe also features a new waffle outsole rubber at the front of the shoe to improve grip and durability. To add greater stability, there's a wider heel base of midsole foam, and there's a new Flyknit upper to improve breathability and produce a more comfortable fit that contours the foot. There's also a wider toe area for a roomier fit, a padded tongue for comfort, and an internal foam pod in the heel for even more cushioning. The Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 received some significant updates to the brand's carbon plate race shoe. The biggest of those is the noticeable increase in midsole stack height to 39.5mm in the heel and 31.5mm in the forefoot. That produces an experience similar to super shoe options from brands like Nike and Asics. That Power Run PB midsole foam works alongside the S-curve carbon fibre plate to produce a soft, bouncy sensation when running, along with a speed roll design that propels the foot forward with a fluid motion. The upper is made from a lightweight mesh designed to be comfortable and breathable, with a form-fit structure to give a lockdown fit. There's also an XT900 outsole to protect the midsole foam and offer grip on the road.
So I've had no concerns with the fit of either of these two shoes in my normal size. That's my normal size across the board. UK, US and EU sizes have all been the size I use for pretty much all my running shoes. Had a good lockdown around the heel and midfoot, enough room in the toe box for up to marathon distance. So yeah, no concerns at all going true to size with these two shoes.
So quick word on fit then. I ran in a UK 8.5 in both these shoes, which is my size, and I would recommend going true to size in both shoes. If anything, I feel like the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 hold a little better across the top of the foot and in the heel than the Nike Vaporfly Next% 3, which I feel I get a lot more movement in this shoe than I did in the Vaporfly 2. So they're roomy and airy, lots of flex in the toe box. For the Vaporfly 3, the Endorphin Pro, a little bit kind of more snug on the foot, but definitely go true to size is how I would play it.
Okay, so the fit for me in these two shoes, I'm an 8. These are both size 8s. I've had no issues with fit at all in these shoes. Vaporfly 3 has been fine from the off. I've done about 50k in it so far, and I've had no issues at all. And it does feel, with this new upper, I think it feels slightly roomier for me in the forefoot than the Vaporfly 2s. Not massively, but it's a very comfortable shoe, so I definitely stay to your size. Saucony Endorphin Pro 3. I've used this shoe for a lot of runs. I did Chicago Marathon in it now, and it's just a very comfortable shoe. Nice bit of padding in it. I've had no issues at all, and I would definitely stay at your size in this shoe.
So when it comes to my run test then, I've put these through very similar tests. I've done marathons in them at marathon pace. I've done some slower, struggly miles in them as well, just to see how they cope on really tired legs in marathons. I've raced a half in the Endorphin Pro 3. I haven't done a half race in the Vaporfly Next% 3. I have done hill runs in both of them. I've done fast interval sessions, all out miles. Yeah, and I've also put them through a side-by-side mile, and here's what I found. So I've just done my usual 1 mile kind of side-by-side test. Got the Endorphin Pro 3 on the right foot, got the Vaporfly Next% 3 on the left foot. And some really interesting kind of points here. One, I think, again, I sort of said this about the Vaporfly 3 and other shoes, but it feels like the Vaporfly 3 is much closer in terms of the ride, in terms of the foot feel, in terms of the stack of cushioning, all of those things to the Pro 3 than the Vaporfly 2 was. The Vaporfly 3 now feels less direct, it's less kind of ground contact. And you know, there's the margins or the difference between the way the two shoes ride in terms of the cushioning underfoot, and I think the propulsion or the punch in each step or that kind of roll through, it's now much less pronounced, basically. These are very similar shoes in my mind now when I'm running in them. I feel like you get a similar amount of kind of response. I feel you get a similar amount of energy back out of each of the shoes. If I'm going to highlight some differences, I think the Vaporfly Next% 3 still feels slightly lighter on the foot. I think the foam, that midsole, that Zoom X foam, compresses a lot more, it sinks down a lot more, and then kind of responds, whereas you've kind of got this sort of slightly sort of firmer bed, or at least it's a bed that doesn't quite sink as much in the Endorphin Pro 3. I think that creates actually like a marginally sort of firmer ride in the Endorphin Pro 3, which is something that I quite like. You're not waiting too long for the sort of foam to rebound. You kind of feel it sort of squash a little bit, and then it's off in the toe off, which I quite appreciate. When it comes to kind of the uppers and the fit, they're both really nice and light and airy. I think they're kind of on a par really with that. I find that I get a better lockdown, better heel hold in the Endorphin Pro 3 than I do from the Vaporfly Next% 3. And that for me makes them kind of marginally more comfortable to run in overall. The other thing I've found here, there's a little bit more in the heel, I think, in the Endorphin Pro 3. It's a little bit kind of wider in terms of the kind of foam there. And I think that just gives you a little bit extra if you're sort of landing a bit further back in your heels. That's not to say that the Vaporfly Next% 3 doesn't have that now. I think, you know, compared to the Vaporfly 2, where you basically didn't really have that much protection, you had to be running in fine form. I think they're more forgiving, basically, the Vaporfly Next% 3, and that takes them sort of closer to the Endorphin Pro 3, I think. So one thing I want to talk about is durability on the Vaporfly Next% 3 versus the Endorphin Pro 3. I know Tom's had some issues with kind of the outsole rubber on the heel, but actually one of the things that I've found with these new uppers is that they don't look like they're going to last to me, in terms of, you know, some of the kind of almost like the crocheted holes that are in there are starting to get big and a bit baggier and loose already. There's lots of wiggle room in the toe, so you sort of do move and your toes around in there, but I feel like they're stretching and losing a bit of their shape already. That's not happening on the Endorphin Pro 3, and I feel like the Endorphin Pro 3 is potentially a better sort of shoe when it comes to overall durability and the mileage you're going to get.
Okay, so the run test in these two shoes for me, this is an interesting one because if you're a fan of the channel, you'll know I've got a long-term love affair with the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3. I did my sub 3 in Chicago in this shoe. I've got a lot of PBs in this shoe. Absolutely loved it from the day I picked it up. It was just perfect for my running style. It's not a long way off the Vaporfly 3 for me, but I think the thing about the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 is that it's just such an accessible shoe. It feels so comfortable on the feet. It just has a lovely, comfortable, natural feeling motion. It doesn't feel aggressive in any way. It's just a great shoe to wear, and you can do pretty much anything in it. You could go and do like a slow 5K in it, and it just feels like a nice cushioned shoe. You can go and run a marathon in it and try and get a sub 3 attempt in it, and it's a fantastically efficient shoe for doing that as well. And when I wear this shoe, I don't often think about it on my feet. Sometimes when I wear a carbon plate shoe, something like the Alphafly, you know it's on your feet. You know what it's doing. You can feel it doing things and pushing you forward and propelling you in a certain way. Whereas the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3, I don't feel that. It's just on my feet. It's just helping me. I'm just moving along at a lovely pace, and I like that about a shoe, especially if I'm doing a marathon. I like having something on my foot which I don't think about, and it's not an issue for me when I'm running those sorts of distances. Now, the Vaporfly 3, I've always been a fan of Vaporfly 2. I've pretty much said it's one of, if not the best carbon plate shoe that's ever been made. So the Vaporfly 3, I was very interested to see what Nike had done to this shoe, if it was going to be better, if it was going to be worse than the predecessors. What I would say is that I think it's an improvement. Not massively, to be honest. It's marginal, negligible difference between this and the Vaporfly 2. I did race in it a couple of weeks ago for the Worthing Half Marathon, and I was struggling quite a bit in that race. And I did notice later on in the race that there was a little bit more cushioning in this than what I was used to in the Vaporfly 2. Not massively, not anything that's going to change the world, but I did notice a little bit more cushioning in it. Everything else about the shoe is pretty much the same for me. I don't think I noticed any major differences against the Vaporfly 2. So if I was to pick up this shoe or the Vaporfly 2, I would go for this one. But if I didn't have the Vaporfly 3, I wouldn't really mind. I'd just use the Vaporfly 2. It's not a massive advancement on it. It is an improvement, but it's not going to make any major difference to your running, I don't think. So both of these shoes I've used. I've used the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 for loads of races, and I still think it's fantastic. It's still a go-to shoe for me whenever I'm going out for a race, and I think it just works for everyone, really. I think everyone I know who tries this shoe really likes it. Some people don't say it's like the best carbon plate shoe, but they still like it. They still enjoy running in it, and I think that's a big win for Saucony with the Endorphin Pro 3. I think it's all about that accessibility and making a shoe that everyone can use, because that wasn't the case with the Endorphin Pro 2. That was a bit of a niche shoe, and I didn't like that, and I know a lot of other people didn't like that shoe. Vaporfly 3, you're getting what you expect. It's a tweaked Vaporfly. It's slightly different Vaporfly, but not massively, and all the changes that have been made to it haven't changed it massively. The one thing I would say, and you'll have to go have a look at look at my Worthing half marathon video. I did have a major issue where the outsole came off, which was after about 30k of running, which tore off this back bit here. I assume that might be a manufacturing problem, because I've not heard any other people mention it, but it's worth flagging, because obviously it's a new shoe, and I'll be interested to see if any of you have had a similar issue with the Vaporfly 3 as well.
So these are two of my favourite carbon racing shoes. They're both lightweight, all-rounder carbon shoes in that they can handle really running fast at any distance. Like, they're very good for 5k races, they're good for marathon distances. I've done the London Marathon in both of these shoes, although with the Endorphin Pro it was at quite a relaxed pace the week after the Berlin Marathon. And they're also good for short reps on the track. Everything really, because they're lightweight, they've got all that cushioning there though, that protects the legs well, and they're good, fast, efficient rides, as you'd expect. Their rides do feel pretty different though. The Vaporfly gives you a bit more back from the foam, I find. I think it's a slightly more propulsive feeling shoe, whereas the Endorphin Pro 3 is really a very smooth shoe. I don't think the foam is quite as good, but the geometry with that speed roll rocker really works very well for me. I find it very easy to get into sync with the shoe and run very fast in it. I really feel like I'm almost skipping over the ground at times in the shoe. Vaporfly has a bit more punch, and I think that can feel a bit more aggressive, certainly on short distance races. And actually at the back end of a marathon, I think it does give you a little bit more oomph potentially than the Endorphin Pro 3, but really they're both very effective in what they do. But I do have a couple of concerns with both shoes. With the Endorphin Pro 3, I did find I absolutely loved it for the first 100k or so. I really felt it was as good as anything out there. But after that point, the foam just softened a little bit for me. I feel like the shoe lost a little bit of the punch I like during fast races, during any kind of fast run. It just didn't feel quite as good as it did in that first 100k. So I do think it's a shoe that maybe loses a little bit of its edge over time. It's still a great shoe, a very fast shoe, and a nice comfortable one for fast running. But yeah, I don't know if it felt quite as good as it did in those early days later on. I haven't got any concerns about that with the Vaporfly. I've also gone over 100k in this shoe, and the midsole still delivers the same amount of oomph as it did when it was new. But the concerns here on durability are with the outsole, a fair bit of wear at the back of the shoe there. It's even worse on my left shoe. It's got a thinner outsole, this shoe, compared to previous models, and I do think that will tell in terms of durability. This is a shoe I think you're going to have to save really for race day and the occasional key workout. Endorphin Pro 3 have had no problems with durability in terms of actual wear and tear. I do think it's a shoe that works very well actually for lots of training, because it has got that very comfortable, more natural feeling ride than the Vaporfly. This is a shoe that I really did enjoy putting on for absolutely any kind of run, whilst it still had the chops for fast runs. Vaporfly is something that I do prefer just using for fast runs. Like, it's not an uncomfortable shoe, but they're certainly more enjoyable shoes to be cruising around in at easy paces. Overall, certainly two great shoes that I've loved running in, especially running fast in. Vaporfly, I think, gives you a little bit more oomph, whereas the rolling, smooth ride of the Endorphin Pro 3, I think, is very appealing in lots of ways.
Okay, so my verdict on these two shoes, it's a really tricky one, to be honest. Either of these shoes, if this was my main race shoe, I would be completely happy and I wouldn't be looking for another shoe. If it came down to it and I had to choose one of these two shoes for a race, and that's something that I will have to do very soon, I think I'm going to go for the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 still. It's just still a lovely shoe for me. I just really enjoy that motion. I think if I was doing a 5k, or a 10k, I'd probably go for the Vaporfly 3, just because I think there's a little bit more pickup in this shoe. It's a tiny bit more aggressive. It's not massively aggressive, not like some carbon plate shoes like the Alpha Fly, just really sort of propels you forward. I think this is a little bit more subtle, but it does have a lot more pop in it, and that lightness with the pop really helps when you're trying to pick up the pace. I've not had any, I still like the Pro 3. I've got PBs in short distance races in the Pro 3, but I just don't think it has the pop that the Vaporfly 3 has. So I think for short distances, I'll probably go Vaporfly 3, but for pretty much everything, if I was only going to go for one race shoe, I would get the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3 still. And you can often find it cheaper as well than obviously the Vaporfly 3. So not a lot in it, and to be honest, I'd be happy with either, but I'm going for Pro 3.
So verdict for me would be on pure performance alone, I do prefer the Vaporfly 3 myself. I think it has a slightly more effective propulsive ride for me when it comes to my fastest runs, my key races. I think the ZoomX foam still is hard to beat really by anything on the market. It just gives a little bit more back than the Power On PB foam on the Endorphin Pro 3. Love using the shoe for any kind of distances. Really concerns are about durability, and as such, it'd be a shoe I would be locking down and just keeping for race day. Endorphin Pro 3 is another brilliant option though for all those races, and if you don't like the maybe slightly more unnatural feel of most super shoes, I think this does feel a bit more grounded and natural underfoot. It's still got that high stack of cushioning, but the rocker geometry really does kick into gear when you run fast, and it does feel very smooth and comfortable to run quick in, really in any distance. So yeah, big fan of the Pro 3 all round. It's obviously going to be a lot cheaper than the Vaporfly 3, I think, when it comes to sales, because not only is it an older shoe, but Saucony have released the Endorphin Elite as well. So that's a shoe that might help knock the price of the Pro 3 down. I do think it's a shoe I'd be happy recommending to most people as well. I think it's a shoe that lots of people just enjoy using because it is nice and comfortable, but still very lightweight and fast, can handle a variety of runs. It's almost a slightly more friendly shoe than the Vaporfly, which is a very comfortable shoe and a great shoe for all kinds of races, but has a slightly more aggressive feeling and is a bit more racy all round, I'd say. It is a lot more expensive though. I think on performance, I think it does have a little bit of an edge, but we're not talking hundreds of pounds of difference if that is what you end up looking at when it comes to trying to pick between these two shoes. So yeah, I prefer the Vaporfly 3, but there's a lot to commend about the Endorphin Pro 3.
So verdict for me then, I have to say first up, I enjoy racing in both of these shoes. I think they're both very, very capable. I think you can go chasing PBs in both of them. They're both enjoyable shoes to run in, both comfortable, both got plenty of energy to give. Both spare tired legs. They both got kind of a decent amount of protection when you are on tired legs. They also kind of help with that efficiency. And when it comes to choosing which of these I think is best, I think it's actually now a far harder to differentiate between these two shoes than it was before when you had the Vaporfly X% 2 and the Endorphin Pro 3. I personally really liked the Vaporfly X% 2 because it was slightly more direct. It was stiffer, it was sort of snappier. I feel like it had you sort of put you more in race mode. I felt like it encouraged you up onto your kind of forefoot, in a really nice kind of high cadence. It just made you have to be in a certain form to race, and it wasn't so great when things were going wrong. And I kind of liked the Vaporfly X% 2 over the Endorphin Pro 3 because of that. This shoe it wasn't quite as live, it didn't make me feel quite as racy. Now these two shoes, the X% 3 and the Endorphin Pro 3, are much more close together, I think, in terms of that overall kind of ride feel. It makes it a bit more of a difficult decision. For me, really, actually, overall, margins here, X% 3 slightly lighter, still feels slightly more racy. I think the fit is a little bit too loose for me. It's not quite as hugging and as snug. Overall, that affects the comfort of the Vaporfly X% 3. I prefer the comfort a little bit more of the Endorphin Pro 3. And really, main factor for me here overall is just going to come down to what on price. And actually, when you can get the Endorphin Pro 3 now for a chunk cheaper, I think this is a more versatile and sort of better shoe overall. And yeah, if I had to choose a shoe, I'd put these both away and go and get the Vaporfly 2, really. But if I have to choose between these two, I think it's going to be the Endorphin Pro 3 for me. It edges it marginally on price and maybe a little bit more comfort.
Okay, so that's it from us. Thanks a lot for watching this Versus. Don't forget to like, subscribe, anything like that. And also, if you go into the captions below, you can find a link to our most recent podcast. And if you're listening to this in mid-May, you'll be able to hear an interview I did with Ed Budd about his views on the current world of running shoes. So thanks a lot for watching. Catch you next time.